Welcome back. We're ready for another episode of Midweek Worship at Two Cities Church. Thank you for joining me. My name is Jeff, and if you are just watching this broadcast for the first time, welcome. We're trying to teach theology today. What we're going to do is learn about God's providence and how he provides, see the word provide in the word providence there, how he provides for his people. In fact, what we're going to look at today is how God intervenes in our lives. But if you don't know anything about this broadcast, if you're relatively new to this church or what we stand for, why we even do this thing and deliver it straight to your living room or a hotel room, why don't you look below me in the notes? It'll not just tell you about this episode, but you'll also see a link to a YouTube video. And if you'll watch that video, you'll learn more about our church, learn more about this broadcast, and hopefully it'll help you grow in your faith. What we're really trying to do is to help you understand our God better. And because you understand him better, you love him more. Which is why we started just a few weeks ago this broadcast where we were learning about providence. And I'm going to do again this week what I've done for the last couple of weeks. If you're going to understand providence, this word that gets used very rarely, and when it does, it gets misused in most societies. Let's eliminate what providence is not, and then just see what we have left over. So I'll put the same list up on the screens that I've used for the last couple of weeks. Providence is not luck. That's how some faiths view the world, as I got lucky, but with a God that's in control of the universe, there can be no such thing as luck. Providence is not fate. Although our fate is in God's hands, the idea of a fate that is capricious and there's no telling how it turns out just doesn't really accurately describe our God. Providence is not good vibes. It's cool with me if you have the good vibe shirt, and I hope you do have good vibes, but everything good and perfect comes from our God, according to the Bible in the book of James, which means good vibes are actually God vibes if they are good at all. Providence doesn't equal progress, although we are much better off today than we were centuries ago. Providence is not just history or the human events of history and the march of time. No, providence is much more than that. And you're going to see this firsthand today. And I also want to remind you, when people throw around the language of Mother Nature did this for me, or the universe said that to me, really, what they're doing is they're trying to find language to describe providence without attributing it to God. Now, providence is God's work in the world. I'll put what it is on the screens for just a second. Providence is God's work. And if you look at the other bullets on the screen, God works by controlling the universe. God works by communicating to people. That makes him entirely unique. We learned that last week. God works by intervening in people's lives. And that's what we're going to focus on this week. And by intervening, I mean God steps in, sometimes in small ways, sometimes in big ways. In other words, sometimes he causes the ocean to roar. Sometimes he causes the mountains to tremble. And I want to ask you, just because you didn't feel the mountain tremble, does it mean that it didn't tremble at all? I don't know if you're familiar with this old Christian song, but I'm trying to set up this song. Did you feel the mountains tremble? Which is what we're going to do next. I'm going to put the song on the screens for you. The words are right there. Why don't you go ahead and sing along? And then when you get done with the song, we can come back and dig into the Bible and what the Bible has to say about God intervening in our lives or in human history. Sing along, will you?
Did you feel the mountains tremble? Did you hear the oceans roar? When the people rose to sing of Jesus Christ, the risen one. Did you feel the people tremble? Did you hear the singers roar? sing of Jesus Christ, the saving one. And we can see that, God, you're moving a mighty river through the nations, and young and old will turn to Jesus. Fling wide you heavenly gates, prepare the way of the risen Lord. Open up the doors and let the music play. Let the streets resound with singing. Songs that bring your hope, songs that bring your joy. Dancers who dance upon injustice. Do you feel the darkness tremble when all the saints join in one song, and all the streams flow as one river to wash away our brokenness? We can see that, God, you're moving. The time of jubilee is coming, when young and old return to Jesus. Through wide you heavenly gates, prepare the way of the risen Lord. Open up the doors and let the music play. Let the streets resound with singing. Songs that bring your hope, songs that bring your joy. Dancers who dance upon injustice. So open up the doors and let the music play. Let the streets resound with singing. Songs that bring your hope, songs that bring your joy. Dancers who dance upon injustice.
There's many ways that God intervenes. Sometimes it is so blatantly obvious that you can't explain it any other way. In other words, our scientific methods and instruments cannot measure the way that that thing or that event just happened because God supernaturally stepped in. Sometimes God intervenes in really significant ways, but they might be small ways and you didn't notice it at the time. But later on, it became huge. And sometimes God intervenes in huge ways. Sometimes God intervenes in big ways. Sometimes he intervenes in small ways. Sometimes he intervenes in really significant ways. Sometimes he intervenes in what seems insignificant, but later on becomes huge in our lives. And I'm going to get real with you. Sometimes when God intervenes, it's awesome. Sometimes when God intervenes, it's awful. And I've got a verse for you that I'm going to put on the screens in just a second. In fact, I want you to go ahead and to memorize this verse this week. But this verse says something, and when you understand the rest of the story, what this verse says is absolutely mind-blowing. So would you commit with the rest of Two Cities Church to memorize Genesis chapter 45, verse 7? Here's what the Bible says. This is Joseph, the son of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Jacob's son, speaking to his brothers. And Joseph says, Genesis 45, verse 7, God sent me ahead of you to establish you as a remnant within the land and to keep you alive by a great deliverance. Genesis 45, verse 7. Now, There's a whole lot of backstory here. Joseph is the favored son of Jacob, and Jacob has a big family. He has 12 sons, but Joseph is the favorite by far. And Jacob makes sure that everybody knows Joseph is the favorite by giving him special gifts, a special suit or jacket, so that all of his brothers know, I love that one more than I love you. It's all dysfunctional, and I'm not going to get into all of that right now, but his brothers hate Joseph. His brothers grab Joseph. His brothers try to murder Joseph, and they would have got away with it, except one of them steps in and says, hold on, y'all. Let's don't kill an innocent man. And by the way, he's our brother. Let's make money off of him. Let's sell him as a slave into Egypt. And Joseph, who's done nothing wrong, except for being basically a bit impetuous and shooting off his mouth, when he really would be wise enough, when he really should be wise enough to keep it closed. Joseph really didn't do anything to deserve it. He got sent to Egypt as a slave. He spends many years as a slave, and not just as a slave, he's wrongly convicted of a crime that he didn't commit. He's thrown into prison, and probably a political prison, which means into a dungeon, which would be miserable. It would be terrible. And then finally, Joseph is taken out of that dungeon after years, and he's elevated to become the second most powerful man on earth, second only to Pharaoh. And when his brothers show back up later on, they don't even recognize Joseph because he is so wealthy, so powerful, so impressive that they couldn't possibly imagine that this guy could be our brother. And then Joseph reveals himself to his brothers. All of that's the backdrop. Now stay with me for what the Bible just said. In fact, what the Bible just said is God sent Joseph to Egypt. Now, it's his brothers that made Joseph a slave. It's Potiphar's wife that made Joseph a prisoner. It's Pharaoh, or you could say God moving through Pharaoh, that elevated Joseph to the number 2 man in the land, and really the number 2 man on earth right now. But Joseph is crystal clear. It is because God was intervening in your life that he sent Joseph ahead to go to Egypt. I'm going to show you a short video clip from an old movie about the life of Joseph from the Bible. And I want you to imagine the pain of being in prison and maybe tortured or in dungeon for years. We don't have the exact records. I want you to watch this video clip. Then I want you to come back and think with me about what he's really saying to these brothers here. Check this out, will you? Yeah, so now that you've seen that video clip, you get a better grasp of what Joseph is saying. God sent me to Egypt. Now, he did it through these wicked brothers of mine. God was the one who put me in a position where I could be called out by Pharaoh to interpret some dreams and to become the number 2 guy in the land. But man, it was miserable. Man, it was painful. And sometimes when God intervenes, it makes no sense. It hurts. You want it to stop. And if Joseph would have stopped, if he would have given up, if he would have taken his own life, there would be no rescue. But Joseph says, God did this so that you, his own brothers who hated him and wanted to murder him, would survive and thrive because of Joseph. And what the Bible is saying is God intervenes sometimes in the most powerful and the most spectacular ways. And you and I see it, and it is awesome. And you want to slap high five. Actually, I just did high 10. Sometimes life just seems so bad that you're like, how could God possibly have anything to do with the pain and the problems that I'm going through right now? And Joseph's life is a great example that even in those moments, God, according to the book of Romans, chapter 8, can work everything out for his glory and for your good. So even though you didn't hear or feel the mountains tremble, does that mean that they didn't tremble? Even though you didn't hear the ocean roar, does that mean it didn't roar? And even though things are not turning out the way that you want them to, does that mean that God didn't intervene? And maybe even intervene on your behalf for his glory and your good. It just feels really, really bad right now. Here's the question I really want you to wrestle with and be honest with this question. Maybe honest with your family, honest with some friends right now. Must God answer your prayers? I'm just going to insert the word here, exactly as you expected. Because Joseph had a vision. Joseph had dreams that he was going to become a powerful leader and his family would serve him, and it happens. But you don't even have to tell me. I can read between the lines in the Bible. That did not go the way Joseph expected it to go when he was a slave in Egypt or when he was a prisoner in dungeon. And God still answered. God still intervened, just in ways that Joseph couldn't possibly have understood, could have never wanted. But in the end, God worked it all out. So you have prayers and you want God to answer your prayers. Does he have to answer them exactly the way you want him to? Or are you willing to allow him to answer your prayers and intervene in your life? Maybe in ways that you don't recognize, you don't understand, maybe even ways, here it comes, that you don't like. But he's still at work. And in the future, it'll all make sense and it'll all be perfect because God has been doing it for his glory and for your good. Why don't you just think about that when you're getting ready to go to God in prayer today? I hope you have a great week. See you back here next time. God bless.